Silence. That was the first thing heard. Not the audience's murmurs, not the lawyer's shuffling, not even the creak of wooden benches. Only silence. It was the kind of silence that weighed heavy on your chest, the kind that yelled louder than words. Then, the heavy courtroom doors creaked open. Kody Brown entered. His gait was slow and dragging, as if the burdens of the world rested on his shoulders. His confident walk was now missing. His own face, normally so full of self-possession and authority, was white, nearly ghostly. His eyes danced warily back and forth, not locking onto anyone's. Every gesture betrayed what he never uttered aloud. He was afraid. The air changed. Everyone stood still, holding their breaths. Some of them leaned forward on the wooden benches. Others folded their arms, their faces frozen in anger or sorrow. Everyone in that courtroom knew that this was not just a case, that this was not about money, property, technicalities of the law. No, this was about a father being made to face the worst accusation of all, that his own failures as a parent had killed his son. Kody attempted to swallow, but his mouth was parched. His hand ran over the table ahead of him as he sat down, but even the surface was cold. He slightly shifted his head, and his gaze fell on Janelle. She didn't glance at him. She sat straight ahead of him, her jaw fused together, her knuckles pale as she held a tissue in her lap. To her right was Christine. Her face strained, her lips clenched together. Opposite her was Mary, with arms crossed, eyes keen and unflinching. And Robin, his final friend, his final colleague. But she too would not meet his gaze, the tears shining on her cheeks as she looked down at the bright floor. Kody glanced away hastily, his gut churning. He entered this courtroom as a husband, a father, a man familiar to millions from the television screen. But here, none of that existed. Here he was merely another father asked the most agonizing question. Did you fail your son? Abruptly. Bang! The judge's gavel struck the wood like thunder cracking across the sky. The sound echoed, slicing through the silence and making Kody flinch. This court is now in session, the judge announced firmly. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of authority, yet there was something softer beneath it. Everyone knew this was not going to be an ordinary trial. Gasps and whispers broke out in the gallery as the lights from cameras flashed. Journalists took frantic notes. This was not a case. It was a drama. The whole world was watching, not for legal niceties, but because it was the stark human tragedy behind it all. Some of the people watching from the comfort of their couches miles away would describe the sensation afterwards, as if they were themselves in the room. They said that they felt the tension squeezing against their chest, could pick up on the brokenness with each breath. Within the courtroom itself, the air was oppressive. The scent of wood polish, the squeal of the shoes on the marble floor, the soft hum of the ceiling lights, all of it seemed magnified. All of the smallest sounds served as a reminder that this wasn't televised scripted reality. This was actual reality. This was pain, deception, and heartache unfolding before the country. The judge pushed her glasses up and looked down at the documents before her. We sit in court today to hear the case involving the late Robert Garrison Brown, she said deliberately, carefully. The question before this court is not one of criminal intent, but of accountability, responsibility, and emotional negligence. Each word fell like a rock in the bottom of Kody's stomach. Negligence. That was a word that cut deeper than any put-down. The judge went on. The issue is whether the conduct or omission of his father, Kody Brown, was a cause or factor in the pain, suffering, and eventual catastrophe of his son's death. A shocked gasp moved through the room. Some in the crowd shook their heads. Others muttered prayers softly. Kody did close his eyes for a moment, but when he opened them, he met Janelle's glare. Her cheeks were smudged with tears, her eyes pink, but there was a fire there as well. A fire that burned with loss, with anger, with years of disappointment. He was on the verge of saying something, to justify himself, to account for the fact that he had reasons, excuses, explanations, but nothing would come. And even if they would come, he knew nobody in the room cared to hear excuses anymore. Across the room, Christine put a shaking hand on Janelle's arm. The motion was small, but the intent was understood. We stand in this together. It was a solidarity born of sorrow, of mutual pain. It's the unbreakable tie of mothers who had seen their children cry out for love that was never there. The bailiff called the first witness on the list. But before anyone stood, the judge stopped. She scanned the courtroom, her gaze stopping on Kody. "Let it be known," she said, her voice soft but compelling. "This is not a matter of television ratings, a matter of popular opinion. This is a matter of a family that has been torn apart, and a son no longer alive to advocate for himself." Her words hung suspended like smoke. Everyone sensed it, even the reporters hardened abnormally to sensationalism, dipped their pens for an instant, their faces grim. Kody shifted in his seat again, his palms sweating. He thought of Garrison, his smile, his laughter, the way he used to run into his arms as a child. He thought of the nights he convinced himself that keeping distance was better, that tough love was the right choice. He thought of the endless arguments with Janelle, of Christine's angry words, of Mary's cold silence, of Robin's pleading eyes. And then he recalled that phone call, the one that had destroyed everything. The one that informed him his son was dead. His heart was racing now, the courtroom walls closing in. For the first time in years, the man who could dominate every room he entered felt totally powerless. The judge reclined in her chair, her expression impassive. This court will receive testimonies. This court will receive truths long buried beneath excuses and silence. And it will rule, not on innocence or guilt, but on responsibility. Her gaze again found Kody's. "Mr. Brown, you will not be permitted to hide today. Hiding time is done." The crowd changed. Cameras snapped. Some clasped tissues to their eyes. Others shook their heads with outrage. The trial had yet to begin, but the air was charged with judgment already. And in that instant, all the hearts within the room knew one thing. This was not merely the start of a court proceeding. It was the start of a reckoning. The case, the guilt of emotional blame over Garrison Brown's death, and whether or not Kody, as a father, had let down his family. The bailiff's voice echoed out. "The court calls Janelle Brown to the stand." Each head in the courtroom swiveled. Janelle stood up slowly from her chair, holding a tissue between her fingers. Her legs were steady, but her expression revealed the turmoil brewing within her. She had walked with quiet dignity for years. But today was different. Today, she was more than just a wife or former wife. She was a mother in mourning. Kody watched her walk away. He wanted to talk, to call out her name, but his throat constricted. He knew what was about to happen. He knew she would utter the words he had been avoiding since that night. All collapsed. Janelle settled into the witness stand. She shuddered as she fiddled with the microphone. She didn't say anything for a very long time. She simply sat, looking at the crumpled tissue in her lap. The silence hung heavy, and the crowd leaned forward, waiting for the moment. Eventually her voice cut through, trembling. "Rough, Kody?" she whispered, but the words carried like thunder. "I begged you." The room fell quiet again. Janelle's words cut the air with such intensity that even the judge leaned forward. "I pleaded with you to come be present for our son," she went on, her voice cracking. "Do you recall the nights I phoned you? Do you recall me saying to you that Garrison was hurting, that he was alone, that he needed his daddy?" She darted her eyes toward Kody, briefly. He gazed downward, avoiding eye contact. "You told me you were busy. You told me you had things to do. You told me you'd take care of it. But Kody, you never did." She stuttered and put her hand in front of her mouth. The tissue collapsed in her hand as she cried. A low murmur filled the gallery. Some shook their heads. Others whispered in awe. The agony in her words was too hard to endure. Janelle dropped her hand and went on, her voice more harsh now. "Do you know what Garrison told me the evening before he passed away?" Her lips quivered, but she spoke the words. "He told me, Mom, Dad doesn't care about me. He only cares about Robin." The gallery collectively gasped. One woman in the back buried her mouth once with both hands. A man in the front shook his head, grumbling under his breath. Janelle's shoulders trembled as she wept outright now. "Do you know what it's like to hear your child say that? To hear him believe he was invisible to his own father? Her words sliced through the air like knives. Kody's fists were clenched tightly on the table, his knuckles turning white. He wanted to yell that it wasn't true, that he did care. But the reality was right there in front of him. In the shattering of the woman who had once trusted him with her heart. The judge granted Janelle a moment to collect herself. She wiped at her face with the crumpled tissue, her breathing ragged. Then she gazed directly ahead, her voice firmer. Kody, I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear the reasons you believe warrant your decisions. The bottom line is, our son needed you. He reached out for you. And you weren't there. Her voice grew louder, anger tainting her words now. You were too busy seeking control, too busy creating a spotless little life with Robin, while the rest of your children imploded. You left him when he needed you most. A gasp ran through the room once more. Robin shifted awkwardly in her seat, tears streaming down her face. She shook her head, speaking words no one could hear. Christine stretched out and put a hand on Janelle's arm from the witness stand, silently providing her support. Janelle smiled in appreciation, before returning her attention back to the judge. I can't bring back my son, she whispered, her voice cracking again. But I won't allow this courtroom to forget what he was. He was good, he was resilient, and he was desperate for his father's love. And that love never came. The gallery burst out in muted weeping. Some of them brushed at their eyes. Even the reporters, hardened veterans of years of reporting tragedy, were shaken as they wrote out notes with shaking hands. The judge's gaze softened. Mrs. Brown, she said softly. Do you think that Mr. Brown's not being there had a direct role to play in the breakdown of your son? Janelle did not hesitate. Her weak voice was steady. Yes. Absolutely. My son died feeling that he was unloved by his father, and no court decision, no apology, will ever make that lie untrue. The weight of what she said bore down on all of them in the room. Kody's chest ached. His eyes watered, but he would not give in to crying. Not here. Not in front of them all. But deep inside, he knew Janelle spoke the truth. He recalled the missed calls, the voicemails left on his phone, the occasions when he'd opted for silence rather than appearance. Janelle rose slowly, her hands still shaking. She glanced back one final time, her eyes on Kody. Her own eyes were puffy, crimson but blazing with something other than sorrow, something akin to anger. I pleaded with you, she said again, her voice low even, conclusive. And you turned your back on us. She turned from the stand, her shoulders weighed down, but her stride unbroken. As she walked past Christine, she fell for a moment into her arms, weeping onto her shoulder. Christine murmured quietly, you were strong. He needed your voice. The courtroom was quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. Time had been suspended. Kody sat stock still, his eyes white with fear, his lips clamped into a thin line. On the inside he was yelling, but on the outside, he remained quiet. The gavel rang out once more, shaking the room. Order in the court, the judge stated, her voice stern but compassionate. But even as order was regained, the harm had already been done. Janelle's words had drawn a picture too brutal, too strong, too destructive to be overlooked. And for Kody Brown, just the start. The judge's voice rang out across the quiet courtroom. The court will now hear testimony from Christine Brown. The mood changed at once. The tension that had arrived after Janelle's testimony returned to a thickness once more. Christine pushed back her chair and smoothed out her dress with shaking hands. She made her way to the witness stand with chin held high. But anyone who looked closely could see the tempest behind her eyes. Christine was always the warm, bubbly, motherly one. The one with the smile in the midst of chaos. The one with the children carried in her heart, without condition. But today there was no smile. Today her voice was not a comfort. Today it was honed by years of disappointment, and a grief that had almost no words. She sat down, fiddled with the microphone, and for an instant just gazed at Kody. Her gaze was direct, sharp, unyielding. He squirmed uncomfortably in his chair, his mouth set in a thin line. When she finally spoke, it was quietly but deadly. You once said, this family is about love and oneness. Her words lingered in the air like mist. The gallery leaned in, anxious, expectant. Christine allowed the silence to build, her eyes never leaving Kody. You said we'd be a team. That however hard it got, however painful, we'd get through it together. But Kody, she broke, her voice shrill. When Garrison needed you the most, you took power. You took control. And with that, you drove him away. Gasps spread throughout the room. Cody's face constricted, his jaw clenching as though he longed to say something, to protest. But Christine wasn't done. She leaned in closer to the microphone, her voice trembling with unbridled rage. I saw my children cry because their brother was miserable. I saw them struggling to keep him up when he drowned in isolation. And where were you? Her sentences snapped like a whip. Where were you, Kody? Robin's house hiding behind excuses. Building walls not bridges. You shut him out. And you call yourself a father. The room hummed with murmurs. Christine's voice had increased now, shaking with emotion. Tears shone in her eyes. But her rage propelled her forward. She looked over at the judge, then back at Kody. Do you know what Garrison used to say to me? He said, Mom, Dad doesn't see me anymore. He doesn't even know who I am. Do you get what that means? He felt invisible. Your own son felt invisible in front of you. Christine's voice shook into sobs. But she didn't falter. She took a deep, ragged breath, covered her mouth for a moment, and then went on. You broke us, Kody. You broke your son. You broke this family piece by piece until all that was left was pain and silence. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the scratching of pens ceased. Every set of eyes was fixed on Christine, their hearts thudding with hers. Kody had finally raised his head, his voice shaking. Christine, that's not fair. Christine shut him down immediately. Fair? Her tone was laced with incredulity. Do you believe this is all about fair? Garrison is dead, Kody. He's dead. And you want to discuss fair? Her words crashed into the room like a wave, shutting him up at once. His mouth opened and then shut once more, his eyes dropping. Christine wiped away her tears, her tone mellowing now, cracking from anger to sorrow. I pleaded with you too, she whispered. I pleaded with you to call him, to show up, to put your pride aside for 1 minute, and just be his dad. But you were too proud, too stubborn, too blind to notice what harm you were causing. Her body trembled with sobs. But she pushed on, determined to be heard. I left you because I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand watching my children, and myself being shoved aside, while you acted king in Robin's fortress. I hoped that leaving would wake you up. I hoped that then you would see. But even after I was gone, you ignored him? You ignored us all. She gasped, her breathing unsteady. Then, with all the strength she possessed, she spoke the words that appeared to stop the air in its tracks. You didn't merely lose me, Kody. You lost your son. And that's on you. There was another gasp in the room. Individuals muttered hotly, some of them shaking their heads in fury, others wiping away at tears. Even the judge, hardened by years of hearing tragedy, clamped her lips tight and ducked her head for a second. Christine shifted back a little, her shaking body. She breathed hard into the microphone for a moment. And then in a softer, calmer voice, she continued. I don't dislike you, Kody. I wish I did. It would be so much simpler. But what I do have is worse. I have nothing. Because you're not the man I used to know, and you weren't the father Garrison required. Her last words landed like rocks in court. Christine gradually stood up from the witness stand. She didn't glance at Kody once more. Instead, she moved away toward Janelle, and collapsed into the seat next to her. Janelle took her hand, and the two women held on to each other, mourning. Robin sat paralyzed, silently crying her eyes out. Mary's face was stern, her arms still crossed tightly over her chest. And Kody slumped over the table, his hands trembling, his eyes glassy, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The judge rapped her gavel once, getting order again, but her voice was thick with emotion. The court recognizes Christine Brown's testimony. We appreciate your bravery. But the heft of Christine's words still lingered heavy in the air. It was beyond testimony. It was a shattering of illusions, a mirror held up for Kody to see what he had become. And as the gallery wiped away their tears and steadied their breaths, one thing became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about a father and a son. This was about a family shattered beyond repair. The judge's voice boomed again, calm, authoritative. The court will now hear testimony from Mary Brown. A shiver of tension swept the room. Mary had always been the reserved one. The first wife. The silent one who hovered in the background. Who survived in silence. She was expected to be cold. Maybe even indifferent. But as she stood up from her chair, it became evident that she had been brewing a storm all these years. Mary moved slowly to the stand. Her body rigid. Her face impassive. She adjusted the microphone with painstaking care, then clasped her hands neatly on the desk before her. For a few moments she just sat, her eyes fixed on Kody. The silence hung in the air, thick enough to strangle on. Finally she spoke, her voice low and even, and biting as glass. I spent decades of my life loving you, Kody. Believing in you. Defending you. She spoke the words into the courtroom, cutting through the air. Kody shifted uneasily, his eyes glancing aside. I was there when no one else believed in you. I gave up my happiness. I suffered loneliness. I suffered humiliation. And every single time, I told myself it was worth it. Because you promised me. That family was everything. Mary leaned forward, eyes narrowing. But do you have any idea what I see now? I see that family was never that important to you. It was a performance. A show. A means to control. To put your name in lights while the rest of us were falling apart inside. Gasps ran through the audience. Even Christine, who had last spoken with such rage, blinked in shock at Mary's brazenness. Mary's voice became sharper, icier. You disregarded us. You disregarded our children. You disregarded the pain, the crying, the pleading. And now, your son is dead. And Kody, she stopped. Her tone ice. You can't just discount that. Kody winced visibly, his shoulders hunching. Mary's voice was even but her words stung. She went on, her tone unshakable. I was not Garrison's mother, but I observed. I noticed the distance increasing. I noticed how much he wanted you to pay attention to him. And I noticed how you dismissed him like he was irrelevant. That is what happened. And you cannot escape from it. Her eyes locked on him, unblinking. You always had excuses. Always a reason, always someone else to blame. But no excuse will ever erase what happened. Your choices, your neglect, cost your son his life. And the blood of that regret will never wash off your hands. The gallery erupted in whispers. The judge raised her gavel, but didn't strike it. She too seemed caught in the power of Mary's words. Mary stood up straight, her tone easing just a little. I stayed with you longer than I should have. Kody, I stayed because I believed there was still a good man in there. But the man I see now, he's a stranger, and I can't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. Not when his son is dead. And he still won't accept reality. With that, Mary rose. She didn't wait for the judge to dismiss her. She returned to her seat, her expression as hard as rock. The whole room was staring at her, quiet as she sat and crossed her arms tightly over her chest. The judge breathed slowly, then moved her eyes to the next name. The court will now hear from Robin Brown. Everyone's eyes turned to her. Robin's face was white, her hands shaking as she stood up. She had been silently weeping during the testimonies, frantically wiping at her eyes with tissues. Now she was scared. Scared to talk. Scared of what she would say. Kody stared at her in desperation, as if she were his final lifeline. Robin had been his defender, his protector, for years. But even she appeared unsure now. Robin walked up to the stand, her knees shaking. She adjusted the microphone with shaking hands, and sat down. There was a long silence before she was able to speak. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Silent tears ran down her face. At last her voice broke, hoarse and weak. I never wanted this. Her voice was a mere whisper, but the room strained forward, eager to hear. I never wanted to take anybody's place. She went on, her voice breaking. I never wanted to cause any pain. I pleaded with Kody. I pleaded with him to contact the children.
I said they needed him. I said they were in pain. She dabbed at her face with the tissue, her shoulders heaving. But he would not listen. He still believed there was time. He always believed there would be more time. Her voice increased in volume, shaking. But there wasn't. And now Garrison is dead. And I find myself thinking, what if I had pushed more? What if I had made him listen? Robin's weeping filled the courtroom. Gallery members openly wept now. Tissues clutched to their faces. Even Janelle, though angry, closed her eyes and nodded slightly, accepting that Robin's sorrow was authentic. Kody leaned forward, his eyes wide, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. Robin, he whispered, as if pleading. But Robin shook her head hard. Don't, she said in tears. Don't you even look at me like I can save you from all this? I tried to save you, Kody. I tried to save this family. But you didn't want to be saved. You wanted to be in control. And now it's too late. Her words cut deeper than any accusation so far. For years, the world had assumed Robin was Kody's rock-solid supporter. But now, even she was breaking under the truth. The judge's voice, firm but softer now, cut through the tears. Mrs. Brown, do you think Mr. Brown's actions or inactions were a factor in causing his son to suffer? Robin was hesitant, her shoulders shaking. She glanced at Kody a final time. Her face reddened with love and heartbreak. Then slowly she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I do. The gallery gasped once more. The noise rippled like a wave, washing over Kody and leaving him pale and shaking. Robin lowered her face into her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. The bailiff stepped forward to help her down from the stand, guiding her back to her seat. She sat beside Mary, still crying, while Mary's face remained hard, unflinching. Kody sat frozen, his chest heaving, his eyes glassy. His last defender, his last shield, had spoken against him. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. Order in the court, the judge commanded sternly.
This court recognizes the testimony of Mary Brown and Robin Brown. Their statements will stand on record. But everyone in the room already knew. Their statements didn't merely stand on record. They had gashed themselves into the very walls of the court, resonating in every heart in attendance. And when the silence came back, one thing towered over Kody like a specter. He was alone now. Utterly, totally alone. Silence in the courtroom was agonizing. Each face in the gallery strained forward, anticipating the instant that would redeem Kody Brown, or kill him for good. The family's words had cut, biting through him like blades. But now it was his turn. The bailiff's voice boomed out. Mr. Brown, you may speak to the court. Slowly Kody got up, as if he was a man burdened with 1,000 pounds on his back. His suit was rumpled, his tie slightly crooked, and his face was covered in sweat. His bravado, the hot-fisted tone fans had witnessed so many times on Sister Wives, was nowhere to be found. Instead, a broken man stood in its place. He clutched the stand, his knuckles white, and for a moment he could not even get words out. His lips quivered, his chest rose and fell, as if he were inhaling and exhaling air. The courtroom held its breath, the silence stretching interminably. At last, his voice cracked through the silence. I never thought it would come to this. A father's confession. Kody's gaze snapped toward Janelle, who was sitting grasping a balled-up tissue, her face still damp from tears. He winced at the look of her anguish. I know I failed, he admitted, his voice shaking. I believed I was doing it to protect my family when I pulled away. I believed that staying far away was the best course of action, to make it through the struggles we were enduring. But I didn't see that Garrison was falling through the cracks. His words made Janelle close her eyes, as though each one pierced her deeper. Christine's arms folded across her chest, but her lips quivered. I told myself I'd reach out tomorrow, Kody whispered, his voice breaking. But tomorrow never came. And now my son is gone. A gasp swept through the courtroom. Individuals shifted uncomfortably in their seats, stirred by the emotion in his voice. But for others, it was too late. The judge's stern words, Judge Hamilton, a steel gray-haired woman,
with an unyielding presence, leaned forward. Her voice was firm, yet full of compassion. "Mr. Brown, you stand before me not because the law charges you with a crime, but because your own family calls for accountability. This court does not punish sorrow, but neither will it turn a blind eye to neglect. You can't turn back time. You can't make your absence disappear. What you can do, Mr. Brown, is own up to the truth. Your decisions took away your son's father, and that's something you'll be weighed down by until the day you die." Kody's knees wobbled a little, and he clutched the podium harder. His mouth worked, but there were no sounds. Janelle's cry for justice.
Abruptly, Janelle got up, her body shaking with anger and sorrow. "Your Honor," she declared, her tone cold, "it's not only about responsibility, it's about acknowledgement. For years I watched him leave our kids behind. For years I pleaded for him to show up, and each time he had an excuse. Work, stress, Robin, never his own children. And when Garrison cried out, he wasn't there. He ignored the calls. He ignored the signs. And now we're supposed to believe his tears? His guilt?" The courtroom stirred. People whispered, nodding, some even wiping their eyes. Janelle's voice cracked like thunder. "No court decision will ever return my son to me, but let it be known, once and for all, that this man, that this father, was not around when it counted. Let history mark it down." Kody lowered his head into his hands. The cameras panned in, catching the naked hopelessness on his face. Christine's final word. Christine stood up slowly, her presence demanding attention. For years fans had witnessed her smile, her laugh, her strength. But here her voice rang with flames. "Kody," she said softly at first, "I need you to see something. You didn't lose just a son. You lost love, you lost trust. You lost the very family that you said you were going to build." She took a breath, calming herself. Garrison's death is not only a tragedy, it is a reminder. A reminder that words are nothing without action. You sermonized about unity, about family, about loyalty, but when it counted, you weren't there. And now we are the ones left to clean up the pieces of a broken family. The gallery burst into murmurs. Christine's statement had hit the deepest note yet. Robin's tearful admission. Robin, who had spoken little throughout the trial, finally broke her silence, her voice quivering. "I loved Garrison," she cried, tears falling down her face. "And I told Kody to call. I told him, again and again, that the kids needed him. But he never listened. He always believed he had more time." She spoke to Kody, sobbing as she addressed him in the room. "And now we all have to live with the fact that we were wrong. That time expired. And Garrison paid the price." Her words hung in the air. Even those who had previously defended her now bowed their heads in silence. The final judgment. Judge Hamilton brought up her gavel again. The room stood still. "This court cannot restore what is lost," she declared, her voice unyielding. "But it can give this verdict, Mr. Brown. You are guilty, not of crime, but of failure. Guilty of neglecting the responsibilities of a father. Guilty of allowing pride to blind you. Guilty of putting excuses ahead of love." The gavel came down. Bang, the sound jarred like a gunshot, ringing in every breast. Kody slumped into his chair, his head in his hands. His wails echoed through the courtroom, but no one got up to comfort him. Janelle sat with her eyes fixed on the floor. Christine gritted her teeth. Mary had ice in her eyes, and Robin quietly wept. The closing silence as individuals exited the courtroom. The atmosphere was heavy with despair. Audience members at home would soon refer to it as one of the saddest moments ever witnessed on television. Not due to the theatrics, but due to the reality that had been finally spoken. Kody Brown wasn't cuffed with handcuffs. He wasn't headed to prison, but he had been sentenced to something much worse. The heavy weight of a failed father, a grieving family, and a missing son that nothing, no apologies, no excuses would ever mend. And as the doors shut behind him, one thing was left in each heart. There are some failures that cannot be forgiven. Some losses cannot be reversed. And this family will never be the same again.